My mother started acting strange 3 months ago. I'm talking about the kind of strange that makes you wonder if you ever really knew someone at all. It began with the yearbook. A faded 1974 Riverside High School annual that she'd pull out every morning with her coffee. She'd run her finger over one particular face, a young man with thick-rimmed glasses and an awkward smile. The caption read Robert Mitchell. "Mom," I said one Tuesday morning, finding her crying over the same page for the 5th day in a row. "Who is Robert Mitchell?" She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "My first love, David. The only man I ever truly loved. My father, her husband of 50 years, was 3 miles away in Riverside Memorial Hospital, recovering from a stroke. Tubes in his arms, monitors beeping. And here was my mother, weeping over a high school boyfriend like a teenager. It got worse. She started dyeing her gray hair auburn, the color it had been in that yearbook photo. She bought clothes from stores I'd never seen her enter, trendy boutiques with names like Ageless and Never Too Late. 75-year-old women don't suddenly start wearing skinny jeans and silk scarves, but mine did. "Mom, what are you doing?" I asked, watching her apply makeup with shaking hands. Finding myself, she said simply, "Your father knows the truth, David. I never loved him, not once in 50 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. My father, Richard Hayes, had given her everything. A beautiful home in the suburbs, 2 kids, stability, respect. And this is what she had to say while he lay in a hospital bed? I had to do something. I drove to Riverside, Pennsylvania, a small town 2 hours south where my mother had grown up. I tracked down her old classmates through Facebook and coffee shop bulletin boards. The stories they told painted a picture I'd never imagined. "Oh, Eleanor and Bobby," said Mrs. Patterson, who'd been head cheerleader in 1974. "Those two were inseparable. First love, you know? The real kind. But Eleanor's father." She trailed off, shaking her head. "He had other plans." "What kind of plans?" "Your grandfather wanted Eleanor to marry up. Robert Mitchell was the son of a factory worker. Sweet boy, but no prospects. When Richard Hayes came along, son of the Hayes commercial real estate family, well, let's just say Eleanor didn't have much choice in the matter." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean, no choice?" "Arranged marriage, honey. Or as close as you get in 1970s America. Eleanor's father threatened to cut her off, disown her, the whole 9 yards. She was 19 and terrified. I left Riverside with more questions than answers. But one thing was certain: I needed to find Robert Mitchell. It took me 3 days, 2 private databases, and 1 very expensive skip tracer. Robert Mitchell, age 76. Lived alone in a basement apartment in Queens, New York. I drove there on a Saturday morning, prepared to confront the man who was destroying my family. The building was one of those pre-war walk-ups that probably looked charming in 1950. But now just looked tired. The paint was peeling. The hallway smelled like boiled cabbage and regret. "Apartment B2. I knocked 3 times. The man who answered was thin, almost frail. He wore a cardigan with patches on the elbows, and reading glasses on a chain around his neck. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, I realized, but from early-stage Parkinson's disease. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Robert Mitchell? That's me. My name is David Hayes. Eleanor Hayes is my mother." The color drained from his face. For a moment, I thought he might collapse. He gripped the doorframe, steadied himself, and then, to my complete surprise, started crying. Is Eleanor all right?" The genuine concern in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the reaction of a con man. This was something else entirely. "She's fine," I said carefully. "But she's been thinking about you. After all these years?" He wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. "Please, come in." The apartment was tiny but immaculate. Books lined every wall, mostly poetry and American history. On the coffee table sat a photo album. Opened to a page I immediately recognized my mother at 18, laughing in the sunshine. "I taught high school English for 40 years, Robert said, noticing my gaze. "Never married. Never even came close. Why not?" He smiled sadly. "When you meet the love of your life at 17, everyone else is just a placeholder. I dated, sure. Tried to move on. But Eleanor." He touched the photograph like it was sacred. "She was the real thing. Tell me what happened." And he did. "We met in chemistry class, junior year. She was the smartest person in the room and didn't care who knew it. We'd study together at the public library. Talk for hours about everything and nothing. I was going to go to state college on a partial scholarship. She was headed to nursing school. We had plans, David. Real plans." His voice cracked. "Then her father found out. Mr. Sullivan, he was old-fashioned, came from money, believed in maintaining social status. He told Eleanor I wasn't good enough. Threatened to cut off her college fund. Told her she'd never see her little sister again if she didn't break up with me." "So she broke up with you?" "Not exactly." Robert pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were dozens of letters, yellowed with age. She tried to fight it. For months. But her father was relentless. He introduced her to Richard Hayes, your father. A suitable match, he called it. Rich family. Business connections. The whole package. And Mom just gave in? She was 19, David. In 1974. Women didn't have the same options they do now. Her father controlled everything: her money, her future, her freedom. One night, she called me from a payphone. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said her father was forcing her to marry Richard Hayes within the month, or he'd disown her completely. What did you do? I drove to her house at midnight. Threw pebbles at her window like in the movies. She came out, and we sat in my car until dawn. She told me she was sorry. She told me she'd love me forever. And then she got out of the car and went back inside." Robert's hands were shaking worse now. "I went to the wedding. Stood in the back of the church. Watched her walk down the aisle in a beautiful white dress. Crying behind her veil. Your father thought they were happy tears. That was 50 years ago," Robert continued. "I threw myself into my work. Became a teacher. Tried to make a difference in kids' lives. Since I couldn't have a family of my own. Every year on her birthday, I write her a letter. I never send them. Just put them in that box." He opened it. There must have been 70 letters inside. "Mr. Mitchell," I said, my throat tight. "She wants to see you." His eyes widened. "What?" "My mother. She's been looking for you. I think she wants to reconnect." For the first time since I'd arrived, Robert Mitchell smiled. A real smile, the kind that transforms a person's entire face. "After all this time?" I nodded. "Then yes," he said. "God, yes. I'd love to see her." I arranged for them to meet at a cafe in Brooklyn, neutral territory. I told myself I was doing this for my mother's happiness. But truthfully, I was curious. What would 50 years of longing look like when it finally got resolution? The answer was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. My mother walked into that cafe like she was 20 again. Robert stood up so fast he knocked over his water glass. They stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. "Bobby," my mother whispered. "Ellie." They embraced, and both of them started crying. Everyone in the cafe was watching, but neither of them cared. I left them alone. Some moments aren't meant to be witnessed by children, no matter how old they are. For 2 weeks, my mother was the happiest I'd ever seen her. She and Robert met everyday walks in the park, lunches at quiet restaurants, long phone calls that lasted past midnight. She looked younger somehow, lighter. My sister Jennifer called me, concerned. David, this is getting out of hand. She's talking about taking a trip with him. To Hawaii. She hasn't even told Dad yet. Dad's still in rehab. He can barely speak full sentences. Exactly my point. This feels wrong. But what felt even more wrong was the money. Robert Mitchell had been a public school teacher. Even with a pension, he should have been scraping by in that basement apartment. But now he was talking about Hawaiian resorts? 5-star hotels? Mom, I said carefully one evening. How is Robert affording this trip? She waved her hand dismissively. He has savings, David. Not everyone spends every penny they earn. A teacher's pension doesn't cover luxury vacations. Maybe he invested wisely. But her eyes didn't meet mine when she said it. I did what any concerned son would do. I hired a private investigator. The report came back 3 days later, and it destroyed everything I'd come to believe about Robert Mitchell's redemptive love story. Subject: Robert James Mitchell, Dob 4,121,949. Criminal record: 2014 fraud. Convicted of writing bad checks. 18 months probation. 2017 civil suit filed by Margaret Chen, age 72. Alleged financial elder abuse. Borrowed $35,000 for medical expenses. Subject disappeared. Case settled out of court. 2020 civil suit filed by Dorothy Price, age 68. Similar allegations. Borrowed $28,000. Subject never repaid. Restraining order issued. The investigator had included photos. Robert with these women. Older women. Lonely women. Women who looked remarkably like my mother. I felt sick. I drove to Robert's apartment at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want to give him time to prepare his lies. He answered the door in pajamas, looking confused. David? What's wrong? I threw the investigator's report at his chest. You're a con man. He picked up the papers with shaking hands. His face went white. You prey on elderly women, I continued, my voice rising. You make them fall in love with you, borrow money, and disappear. How much were you planning to take from my mother? 50,000? 100? David, please, stay away from her. Stay away from my family. Or I swear to God, I'll make sure you end up in prison this time. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a parasite. And whatever sob story you told yourself about true love and Eleanor Sullivan? It's garbage. You saw an opportunity, and you took it. Robert Mitchell sank into his chair, and for a moment, I saw him clearly not a romantic hero, but a broken, desperate old man. You're right, he whispered. The admission shocked me into silence. I am those things. I did those things. Tears ran down his face. After Eleanor married Richard, I fell apart. Started drinking in my 20s. Gambling in my 30s. I was always in debt, always chasing the next big win that never came. I burned through my salary, my pension contributions, everything. So you started scamming old women? I told myself I was just borrowing. That I'd pay them back. But I never did. I'm not proud of it, David. I'm ashamed. I'm disgusted with myself. Then why are you doing it to my mother? I'm not. He looked at me with desperate eyes. Eleanor is different. I love her. I really do. I haven't asked her for a single dollar. The Hawaii trip? I was going to tell her I couldn't afford it. I was going to be honest. Forgive me if I don't believe you. I don't blame you. He stood up slowly. I'll tell her the truth. About everything. And then I'll walk away. Good, I said. Do it tonight. I drove straight to my mother's house. I was going to beat Robert to the punch, tell her the truth before he could spin it into another manipulation. She was in the kitchen, humming. Actually humming. Making tea like she didn't have a care in the world. Mom, we need to talk. About what, sweetie? I put the investigator's report on the kitchen table. About Robert Mitchell. About who he really is. She glanced at the papers but didn't pick them up. What did you do, David? I protected you. Robert isn't who you think he is. He's been convicted of fraud. He's scammed at least 2 other elderly women out of tens of thousands of dollars. Mom, he's using you. I expected shock, horror, tears, some kind of dramatic reaction. Instead, my mother smiled. It wasn't a sad smile or a bitter smile. It was calm, almost amused. "Oh, David," she said softly. "You really think I didn't know?" The world tilted. What? My mother sat down at the table and folded her hands, the picture of composure. "Sit down, sweetheart. It's time I told you the truth." "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I've known about Robert's past for 3 months. Since before I even contacted him. My brain couldn't process this." "That's impossible. You found him through your yearbook." "You were crying." "I was acting," she said simply. "Well, semi-acting. The emotions were real enough. But the surprise? The coincidence? All staged. Why would you?" "Because I needed you to investigate him. I needed you to find exactly what you found, react exactly how you reacted, and come here to save me from him. I felt like I was in a dream. A bad one." "Mom, are you having some kind of episode? Should I call Drive Morrison?" "I'm not having an episode, David. I'm 75 years old, and for the first time in my life, I'm thinking clearly." She poured herself tea with steady hands. "Let me tell you a story about your father. The real story. Your father has had affairs for 35 years. Did you know that?" The words hit me like a sledgehammer. "That's not true. Dad would never. 14 different women that I know of. Probably more that I don't. It started 7 years into our marriage. His secretary, originally. Cliché, I know. I found the hotel receipts. Mom, I confronted him. He cried, begged for forgiveness, swore it would never happen again. So I stayed. For you and Jennifer. You were just little kids. I couldn't break up the family." She took a sip of tea, her hand completely steady. "But it did happen again. And again. There was Linda, the real estate agent. Teresa, his business partner's wife. Catherine, who he met at a medical conference. Some lasted months. Others, years. I would have known," I said weakly. "We would have seen something. Your father is very good at compartmentalizing. He'd come home, kiss me on the cheek, ask about your soccer games, help Jennifer with her homework. He played the perfect husband. And I played the perfect wife. Because that's what we did in my generation, David. We kept our mouths shut and soldiered on." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because 3 years ago, I found out about Caroline. The name meant nothing to me. Caroline Harper. She was 26 when your father started seeing her. He was 72. It lasted a year. She got pregnant. The room spun. You have a half-brother, David. He's 2 years old now. His name is Ethan. Richard Hayes, Jr. Sends Caroline $3,000 a month through a shell corporation so the payments can't be traced back to him." I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. "When I found out," my mother continued, "I realized something. I'd spent 50 years in a marriage built on lies. I'd sacrificed my happiness, my dreams, my first love, all for a man who never respected me enough to stay faithful. So this," I gestured helplessly, "all of this with Robert is some kind of revenge?" "No," she said firmly. "It's not revenge. It's reclamation." My mother stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden she'd tended for decades. "I hired the private investigator before you did, David. 3 months ago. I found out everything about Robert, the fraud charges, the gambling, the women he borrowed from. All of it. Then why would you see him? Why would you?" "Because he loved me," she said simply. "In his broken, imperfect way, he really loved me. For 50 years, he never married. Never moved on. Yes, he made terrible choices. Yes, he hurt people. But he never stopped loving me." She turned to face me. "Your father, on the other hand, never loved me at all." "Oh, he liked me well enough. I was presentable, from a good family, a suitable wife for a businessman. But love? Real love? That was never part of our equation. Mom, Dad's in the hospital. I filed for divorce 2 months ago. The heir left the room. The papers are being held by my attorney until your father is well enough to sign them. I've already divided our assets legally, fairly, but firmly. I have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. More than enough, actually. Does Dad know? His lawyer informed him last week. That's why he's been refusing your calls. Another shock. Another piece of my reality crumbling. And Robert? My mother's expression softened. I'm going to help him, David. I'm going to pay off his debts, get him into a good treatment program for his addictions, and then if he's willing to do the work to become a better man, I'm going to spend whatever time I have left with someone who actually wants to be with me. Mom, he's a con artist. He was, she corrected. And your father was a philanderer. Everyone has a past, David. The question is, what do we do with our present? I sat there for a long time, trying to process everything. My perfect family had been a lie. My father, the man I'd idolized, was a fraud in his own way. And my mother, who I'd thought was losing her mind, had been orchestrating the whole thing. Why did you need me to investigate Robert? I finally asked. Because I needed you to see him at his worst before you could accept him at his better. If I'd just told you about your father and introduced you to Robert as my new boyfriend, you'd never have gotten past your anger. You'd have always wondered if I was being manipulated. So you manipulated me instead? She smiled sadly. I prefer to think of it as guided you toward truth. You needed to see all sides of the story: Robert's flaws, your father's betrayals, and my choice to live authentically, even at 75. This is insane. Maybe. But it's my insane choice to make. I visited my father the next day. He was in physical therapy, relearning how to walk without a cane. When he saw me, something in his expression closed off. You know, I said. It wasn't a question. He nodded slowly. Did you love her? Ever? My father was silent for a long time. Then, with great effort, he spoke. I respected her. That's not the same thing. No, he admitted. It's not. Why did you marry her? Because it made sense. She was appropriate. Our families approved. It was what you did back then. You married someone suitable and built a life together. Love was supposed to come later. Did it? No. At least he was honest. Do you love Caroline? He flinched at the name. I care about her. But no, I don't love her either, I don't think. I don't know if I love anyone, David. Maybe I'm not capable of it. It was the saddest thing I'd ever heard. 6 months later, I drove to a small coastal town in Maine. My mother and Robert had moved there together, into a modest house with a view of the ocean. I found them in the garden. Robert was on his knees, planting tomatoes. My mother was reading in a chair nearby, her hand resting on his shoulder as she turned pages. They looked happy. Really happy. Not the performative happiness of my childhood family dinners, but something genuine and earned. David. My mother stood up and hugged me tightly. You came. Promised I would. Robert stood too, more slowly. He'd put on a little weight, looked healthier. Good to see you, son. The word, son, felt strange coming from him, but not entirely wrong. How are things? I asked. Good, Robert said. Really good. I'm 6 months sober. Been going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings in town. Your mother's been patient with me. I've had practice being patient with difficult men, my mother said with a wink. They'd opened a used bookstore in town, Robert's idea, funded by my mother's settlement. It was small but thriving, a gathering place for the community. As I watched them work in the garden together, I thought about love. The complicated, messy, imperfect kind. The kind that survives decades apart and terrible choices. The kind that blooms late but blooms true. My father was in assisted living now, his affairs finally catching up with him. I visited him monthly, out of duty more than affection. He'd lost his business, his reputation, and his family. What he'd gained freedom to be himself seemed like a poor trade. But my mother? She'd lost a comfortable lie and gained an uncomfortable truth. And somehow, that trade seemed worth it. You know what I learned? My mother said as we sat on her porch that evening, watching the sunset. It's never too late to choose yourself. Not at 30, not at 50, not even at 75. You really love him? I asked. Despite everything? Because of everything, she corrected. Robert is flawed and broken and has made terrible mistakes. But he's real, David. He's honest about who he is now. And that honesty, that vulnerability is worth more to me than 50 years of respectable lies. She patted my hand. Your father gave me security. Robert gives me truth. At my age, I'll take truth every time. As I drove home that night, I thought about the story I'd tell my own kids someday. Not the sanitized version about grandparents who lived happily ever after. But the real version. The one about a woman who waited 50 years to live her truth, and a broken man who finally became worthy of her love. They say first loves never die. In my mother's case, hers waited half a century, weathered storms of regret and bad choices, and emerged transformed. She was 75 when she finally started her real life. It wasn't too late. It's never too late.